moves that we change the agenda order to accommodate Clemente, who is come down here to talk on 8.1, 8.2, and possibly a little bit about 8.4. So I'd like to make that motion that we adjust the agenda, move those items up, and then we will continue where we left off. Is everybody all right with that?
I think it has to be unanimous. And I'm good.
Okay, Councillor Martins? Oh, you're okay with it?
I would disagree, yeah.
Oh, okay, I saw your hand, I wasn't sure if you had a question. Okay, so I'll just call a vote, all in favor? All right, so it's approved. So we will move it up. Come on up, committee. We're going to move to the development of town lands, and we'll start with a motion to get this going. For everybody, that's page 62 in your program.
Okay, so thank you again for having me.
Oh, just one second. I want to start with a motion so that we can debate this, and so we've been working it. I'll make the motion that council receive the information as presented, conduct more deliberations, and subsequently provide direction to administration and MMSA at a later date, just to get the ball going. And now I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's my honor to be here. If I may comment briefly on previous discussions about some of the concerns that were raised. I just checked your unsightly premises bylaw, and I noticed that there are provisions within that for designating a property that is considered dangerous and issuing a compliance order. So there is provisions in that bylaw to be able to do that. You may have to do an assessment by a professional, and once that determination is made, you have the authority to issue an order, including up to requiring that remedy be, that dangerous issue be remedied by demolishing, the building or whatever is creating that. The second thing is that some municipalities have what we call community standards bylaw. So what you have is nuisance bylaw, and that's a little bit more comprehensive. The nuisance one generally is about what you shouldn't do. The standards one is more about including what you should do or what the expectations are. And then either you can combine that with provisions addressing nuisance, or that can be a separate bylaw, and then the nuisance one deals with, okay, what is unacceptable. But that's an option that maybe council can look into it. We've worked with some of our members in creating one, which is what the expectations more of like in a positive, and this is what you should, what is expected of you as a property owner in terms of your grass, maintenance standards and whatnot. So that's our
Okay, thanks for that. So we can, maybe our CAO can, talk with our peace officers, see if they feel they have enough, power or the way it's written, but if we need anything more, then we can look at rewriting it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem. So a couple of weeks ago, David emailed me asking about potentially options for creating a subdivision design or plan for the lands that are adjacent to the tennis court, and that morphed into other discussions about lands that are owned by the town and what could be done to maybe bring them up to market for development. I'm aware there have been discussions about other issues that potential property owners have expressed some worries about, and I'm sure council will handle that. My focus is on the planning side of that. So yeah. So what I did was basically I'll be looking at an overview of the lands that you have, and then options for bringing them to market or readying them for development, and then more specifically focus on the one adjacent to the tennis court. And then if there are any questions, please feel free to interrupt me. So in total, town lands based on our assessment is about 1 square kilometers, which is about 16, maybe 17% of the entirety of the town. Of course, not all of them are developable. So these 1 square kilometers translates into about 89 separate lots. 29 have been developed, 60 are vacant. Within that 60, then we separated out the ones that cannot be developed and then isolated the ones that can be. So we have 21 as of now. This is preliminary because we relied on the GIS and the aerial imagery to make that assessment. One of the things that you could do, and I'll speak to, is what we call lot availability study, which is a planning study that assesses, has information inventory on all the different lands and their attributes and whatnot, which is something I'll be speaking to momentarily, but this is our preliminary assessment. So, like I said, 60 vacant, 21 developable. Some of the ones that are undevelopable include, for example, a public utility lot. So it's a vacant lot, but it's designated for utility services, or it's an urban reserve land, or it's a road allowance, which is land that has been dedicated for future road development and all of those. And so there are several of them that, even though are considered vacant, they cannot be developed because there are inhibitions on them. So preliminary, we have about 20 separate lots. 21, I would say, preliminary. Yeah. The map you see next highlights all the lands that are owned by the town within the town. Then the next one is the different land use designations or zoning districts that they are all classified under. Then next one is the developable ones. So that is the ones that could potentially be brought up to market for development. And then there are legal descriptions. If you can see on there, we have the tennis court separated because as is right now, and I'll get to that momentarily, it has a municipal reserve designation on that, and that has some legal constraints or restrictions in terms of what you can do. If you want to develop it or bring it to market, there's a process that the town have to go through to remove that designation from it in order to bring it to market for private or town development, whatever the option the council would prefer.
Which lot was that? Sorry,
So that would be the one hosting the tennis court. So it's the legal description is.
Well, there's the little diagram, and I believe it says 11 or 5. Is that what the one you're referring to? Those little.
I think it's on page 69. If you look, it's a purple. It's highlighted in purple.
Okay.
Correct. Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Yeah,
it's highlighted in purple. That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
The legal description, and I'll get to that. I think that would be.
That little strip. Yeah. It's just, yeah, okay.
Yes, that's it. Yes. Okay. The other ones, as I said, those are ones that are vacant, and those are just the legal descriptions. I spoke to David, and he wanted something like this for potentially providing to a realtor. So this is what we've done. I want to confirm exactly after this meeting that we'll prepare a finalized version for you as well. Yes.
So you don't actually have a code number for the tennis courts? Like all the other ones have a code number for it?
Well, that's correct because the codes are legal and restrictions. So that is how they are identified by law. We haven't added that one yet because I want to be sure that council is going to go on that path. Because as is right now, because of that reserve designation, it is constrained. So it doesn't make sense. Yeah. So all of the other ones are regular lands. The The tennis court one has a reserve designation on it. So to add it to this, you'll have to remove that designation first and potentially, which I'll explain again shortly, subdivide it. So that you separate the tennis court and then the rest becomes a regular lot. Then you have to remove the designation from that. There's a process that has to be done. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Councilor Wakefield has a question.
Well, I noticed like on the map there on page 69, 3 and 4, which is behind Subway, and you have that marked as developable lands. That's not developable. That's the old dump. You can't build anything there, that's why we own it.
Okay.
So that's just.
No, I don't challenge that. So
Oh, yeah, no, it's just, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate you to say, oh, hey, we can put this here.
No, I mean, and that's one of the recommendations is to do the study, lot availability study. So we have to be here and look at all of them and confirm.
Oh, okay,
Because
so
as
this
I
isn't
said-
like a be all to end all.
No. This is
Okay.
preliminary and we did it remotely. So
Okay,
if you want to get that information, you have to do a lot availability study.
Yeah.
And then we'll have to, yeah. So thank you for pointing that one out. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, like I said, so options for the development. So one is the lot availability study, and that is a planning study that provides a factual inventory of all the vacant lands within the town. So you have information about what the characteristics of those lands are, their sizes, who owns them, whether they are private or public, as in town-owned lands, what services are available, and then their capacity to absorb population growth. So that's one option. And like I said, the output will be similar to, it's a little bit more detailed because we separate them into different classifications, residential, industrial, commercial, and all of that. We have a little bit more information about like the services, their capacity, and all of that. So that's one option that if it's supported by council, we could do. And we have an example that we did previously for the town of Grimshaw. So you can see the maps that I have presented show the output of that. So this is the output of that study that classifies all the different available lots for development and the different land use designation or types of development, if I can put it that way. And the second one is display of available lot, visual display. So that would be more of an output from that study. So in addition to the map that I just presented, once the study is done, we could also present that information digitally on your web mapping system as a layer, and then link it to your website. And so that could allow prospective developers to go on there, just see what lands are available within the town, ready for development, what services are within proximity or available for that, particularly their town lands, who to consult and whatnot. So that could also be an output of the lot availability study that will culminate, like I said, in a physical map and then a digital map that people can readily go onto. And then sometimes when developers want to, they generally want to do some preliminary assessment. And if that information is available to them, then they know, okay, what are the options available to me? Does this require, is it ready? Depending on what I want to do I need to rezone and all of that? All of that information can be incorporated on a digital platform that can be linked, because you have a web map platform that we have developed for you. We can put a layer onto it and then link it to your website. So now,
So we put it
yes.
on the website. How do we get developers to look at it? Do they just surf around, or do we tell them they should look?
Yeah, you could post it routinely on your Facebook page, social media. Occasionally we've had calls. We've had people go to your website and then they've seen our information and they give us a call. So typically, social media, generally they will go to your website and see what information, so, or they will call the administration. Yeah. I mean, sometimes if you have a realtor also, they can, of course, extract that information, also post it on their realtor website. Yeah. So now to the tennis court. Yeah, so basic information. So it's about 10,000 square feet. Designated as municipal reserve, as I previously mentioned. It's being used as a tennis court, and then the rest is mostly covered by trees. The land use designation now is Urban Services District, which has, or lists what can be used for and what is not allowed to be used for. So if you can see the legal description, it's called Plan 792074 Block 7 Lot 2 MRO. The MR indicates that it's a reserve land, municipal reserve, and the MDA has restrictions on what that designation allows the land to be used for. And so one is that you could either obtain it through a subdivision process. That's how it came into being. So I'm not sure how this came into being, but it could have occurred as a result of subdivision, which is maybe there was a multi-lot subdivision and then that was dedicated because you're allowed to take that as part of a multi-lot subdivision process. Or the town can also, by bylaw, put that designation of land that the town owns or is in the process of acquiring. So either way, once that designation is in place, there are restrictions on what the land can be used for and what it cannot be used for. So,
Can I ask a
Yes.
question? I'm looking at that, the picture on page 78, and the blue doesn't go right to the road. It cuts off at the courts and goes down. Yet who would own that other part? I'm sure that belongs to the town.
that's correct. Those are separate lots.
Oh, it's a
Yes,
separate
yes,
lot.
but I think they are serving as access, but they are separate lots. They are owned by the town, but they also don't have the reserve designation. So,
Oh,
yes,
okay,
yes,
gotcha.
yes. And as we will talk about, if council's vision is to let that be developed for like a multi-lot residential development, then those two lots could become access way. So those may need some about adjustment as well to provide access because it's going to be an intense development, so you need to have access. So right now, as is, if the lands get separated from the tennis court, technically speaking, they cannot get access via that road because you are going through another property. So that's something I'll have to be resolved. Either consolidated to, in other words, you add it to that portion of the land as well, and then as part of the subdivision design, it can be an access road.
So just before we go, the last time we were discussing this, Councillor Dunn, and I know that they have a spot from Green Acres. You had mentioned that Boyd owns some land somewhere in there.
It does, it's in this package, it says that.
If you look at the two lots just to the east of the apartments there's two lots.
Okay.
Go from the blue down, those are the ones zoned there.
Okay.
Okay,
Have you seen those? I think
okay.
south of the blue zone, right? It's to the south. That's
Yeah,
right.
it's to the south and
Yeah.
to the east of the apartments.
Yes.
Those are void, not town?
Yeah, so as I said, once, whether you obtain it by subdivision or you by bylaw put that designation on, it needs to have that MR surface on the legal title. So that's why it is 2 MRO as is now. Then it must be free from all encumbrances, which is legal inhibitions. Basically, under the Municipal Government Act, lands that have that designation can only be used for a public park, a recreation area, school board uses, or just as a buffer to separate different land uses. So I think as is right now, it's functioning as a recreation site, and potentially the one next to it is just, a green area, which is like a green space. Under the MGA, the town and the school board can enter into an agreement in terms of how to use the land. So that's also allowed. If right now as is, because I'm not sure whether your agreement with the school board covers that land, because generally there is an agreement between municipalities and school boards in terms of reserved lands, uses and whatnot. So I do not know specifically whether this particular lot has the school board's interest in that or not. If it has, then there's a process that they'll have to relinquish that to the town and then to be brought up for development. If similarly, if you also didn't want anything to do with that, you can also relinquish your interest in that and give it to the school. So it goes either way. Before you can, sorry, please go ahead.
So, I mean, this is before my time, I guess,
Okay.
but when and how did it become designated as a MRO? Like, why would the school division have an interest in that chunk of land?
If I can, yeah. So if it was, like I said, I don't know the history behind this, but if it was taken through the subdivision process, then under the Municipal Government Act, once it's designated as municipal reserve, either the town and or the school should have access to it. Yes, so that's how the law is written.
Okay.
Yes. So to be able to either sell it, lease it or whatever, you have to go through the process to remove that reserve designation from that. And that's also outlined in the Municipal Government Act. And basically you have to do a public notice, do a public hearing, so allow people, the community has to be made aware of that. You have to notify adjacent landowners and all of that. And then after council has considered feedback from the community, then you can proceed to officially remove that designation, and you have to inform land titles to do that. So, as I said, part of it is being used for the tennis court. So, if council wants to go that route, then the better option might be to subdivide the tennis court from the rest, and then that is preserved. That will keep that designation, and then the disposal will apply to the remainder.
Yeah, and more important than the tennis courts, it's the water reservoir.
Yeah.
It's underneath the courts is the water
Okay,
reservoir.
yes, yes.
So, I mean, it's a very important piece for the town.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So, process-wise, like I said, you have to remove the reserve, then we could subdivide it to separate out the tennis court, and then from there, we'll need to know council's vision for the land. If it's for, like I said, multi-lot residential development, then we might have to develop what we call an area structure plan, which I'll talk to. If it's to, sell it to a private developer for an apartment building similar to what's adjacent to that, that would just be rezoning, and then the other factors will come into play, but that may not need an area structure plan versus splitting it up into multiple lots and then selling them all to one developer to develop different housing units or individual buyers. That would be the route of having an area structure plan, because you're going to have an intense development and you need to plan for it. So, yes.
So are you just talking about that tennis court chunk, or are you talking about that whole chunk of land there?
Just the trees, right?
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
So if I believe council wants to keep the tennis court, so it's a tree area, yes, the ones adjacent to that, yes. So,
Just a curiosity, under that, I know ATCO just ran some new power lines under there. Do they have a right of way through there for
okay, that,
utilities?
I would imagine they would.
Yeah, so it would, I mean, this is just me speaking, I think others might have other ideas, but especially if they have a right of way and they can't build on top of their right of way, I'm not really interested in that tree area, I'm more interested in the field that's empty there and what we could do with that. But I really appreciate knowing what,
okay,
what's going on there, but,
okay,
I do suspect that they must have, because they were just working in there upgrading their power lines, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
so there's a few trees missing now.
okay. I don't know the extent, if there is and what the extent of that is.
Would they?
If it's an easement, the town still owns the land. So you've just granted them access to the land. You still own it, not them. And there's a process to go through if you need it for development. It might come at extra cost, they may have to realign them or whatnot. But if it's an easement, then that means you have granted them right to use a portion of that land for that. You still own it, so.
Yeah, I mean, that small piece is not really what I'm worried about. I'm more worried about the field and what we can do with that than
Okay.
the trees, yeah.
But were you referring to those two pieces, the easement, the,
Yeah, you can
Oh,
separate them.
okay, yeah, okay. I thought you meant a bigger chunk.
No, I appreciate knowing about it.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so as I said, we will need to have an idea of what council's vision is for the land that's separated out. If it's for a multi-lot development, then, like I said, an area structure plan is more appropriate. And what does that is that it sets in place a framework for the subdivision and development of the land. So the way it works is you have to have, okay, what is council's vision for the area? It's a statutory plan, so you create it, and we will, if that's the route that council wants to go, be part of that process. You create, the different type of lots, roads, access, and all of those things. It has to have a public input into that. We have to do a public hearing formally, because that's also required under the MGA. There are a number of things that have to be addressed under the MGA for an area structure plan. So there are some that are high level theoretical things that we don't need to worry about, but the main ingredients or the technical aspects include what the intended uses will be. So you could have, let's say, all residential or different categories of residential or a mix of uses, whatever council wants, that's, ultimately that's what we will work with. And then you have to look at servicing and utility. So how do you bring services to the land? If they are in close proximity, and then how do you bring them to each of the newly created lots? And that may be through a utility right of way. That will also be done as part of the larger subdivision design for the area. Then you have to look at sanitary supply, gas, and all of those things. They all come into play. Transportation, so road design, road layout. We'll need to, because the town is generally within the referral zone of our better transportation, we need to also involve them to approve, because sometimes there may be multiply effects on access to the town and all of that. So they'll have to review that and also provide feedback. Page 87 shows the services that are in close proximity to the land. So by way of information, there is, generally speaking, services in close proximity. So it might not be as expensive as if they were being brought from a distance location. Then,
So Clemente,
Yes.
just, like, I understand the process of having to get the subdivision approved and going in through that. But I guess, that one little lot 7, is not very big. I'm more interested in coming up with a plan for, if we go back to the empty field, which
in your map on page 69,
Okay.
it's 5 and 11. Those two little numbers of 5 and 11, that field, that's what I would like to see, a plan for developing that.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, the same would apply, so, so, sorry, when David gave me the impression that the tennis court is the priority of council, so that's why the focus is, but the same would apply basically, so that's also a bigger chunk of land, so, so I can tailor it to that, so, the focus here, again, because I was under the impression that that's the one that council was primarily interested in, but the same would apply, so, similar to that, we will have to create the area structure plan, so, to be able to do that, we need to know what your vision is for that area. Do you want it to be fully residential, and then, like I said, different classes of residential, single, low density housing, medium or high density housing. So those are options that are available. Depending on what your preference is, we will work with you to create a vision for that, prepare that area structure plan, like I said, and then once that is done, basically what happens is that then the surveyor will have to go and subdivide the land based on the subdivision design in the area structure plan. Either the town can pay for the services of the surveyor to do everything, and then you add a cost to the selling price of each lot. Or you can have the design there, and then individually people just subdivide on a one-on-one basis. So it will just be different ways of going about that. Like I said, but the key things will be services, extending services to the area, the cost associated with that. If there are any specific issues that sometimes may require like some studies, assessment to make sure that the lands are buildable, which is that they are stable to support housing and whatnot. So basically, that will be the same process that we will go through if council goes through that path. Or, like I said, if you want to have it as a large apartment or whatever, then that may not necessarily need an area structure plan. It will just have to be, I have to look at what zoning that is, but it may have to be rezoned into whatever district that supports whatever council wants to see there.
Okay.
There might be an area structure plan for that kicking around somewhere.
There is.
Yeah, because it was supposed to get built, but then there was issues with where the line was drawn. And somebody owned half of something they shouldn't have.
Oh, so you're saying there is one for that parcel?
I think there's an area structure plan somewhere for that, because somebody did buy that at one point. I don't know how much of this is, we can talk about it in an open session.
Well, the previous owner had it surveyed and had it all subdivided. There's a nice layout of it.
Yeah,
I
but
don't know if it was surveyed, I think he just did a design for it.
No, I actually seen the blueprint of it. It is a.
Well, yeah, but not surveyed in.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't think there's any pins in the ground frame. I think it was just a design.
Okay, yeah.
the tennis court.
So I guess what I would like to see is that area designed. I don't know what that previous design looked like. Maybe we can get it, use that as a starting point, but this is again, my vision for it is to see, some single family homes, but along with some space for apartments, like another Green Acres type apartment or two in there, right? So build those spaces in, so if a developer is interested in building an apartment, the land is there, it's ready, and he can get going on it.
Okay, yeah, if there is one which I'm not aware of, then we may have to revisit it, as you pointed out, then have a discussion with council. If that reflects what you want to see, or we need to update that to reflect what you now want to see, we could do that as well. We will have to amend the area structure plan and then adopt it as an amendment, and then Once that is done, then subdivision and development comes care if services are there. Yes, so if there is one, then we can review it, we can have a, like I said, evaluate it and then have a conversation with you to see whether that's what you still aspire to see there. If not, because it's conceptual as is, we can always make changes to that. And then once that is finalized, then the subdivision can occur.
Yeah, and it's privately owned, so I don't know if we would get that. You know, it's privately owned and whether we could get it or not, we could ask if we would provide it, but the vision at that time might be different than what we see as a need now versus what it was then. Because that was quite a few years ago now, so.
Yeah, well, we would have that here somewhere, wouldn't we? And if we ask him for it, that area structure plan that was done before, the blueprint that was done for it, he's not gonna give it to us.
If it becomes an area structure plan, it becomes town owned. It's not a private document. Because to be considered an area structure plan, it has to be passed by bylaw by council.
So it might have just been a blueprint.
Just the blueprint.
Yeah,
So
so if it's
maybe
just a
with the
blueprint, he won't give it to us.
Probably, and we probably don't have a copy, I don't suspect. But I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask, it's not doing him any good.
So just to clarify, that's number 5, right?
What page are you on?
Number 5 and 11.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, then because I'll have to check because these are lands that supposedly belong to the town. So I say number 5 doesn't belong to the town.
No, number 5
Yes.
doesn't belong to the town?
I'm saying, are you saying that it does not belong to the
No, it does. 5
Oh,
and
okay.
11 do belong to the town, to my knowledge.
Okay,
Yeah.
so because I heard you say it's a private land.
Well, it was, those lots 5 and 11 were owned by somebody else in the past.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now they belong to the town.
Now they belong to
Okay.
the town.
Yeah.
Yes, so if there was an area structure plan, it belongs to you.
Yeah.
If there isn't, we can create one for you. So, because to our knowledge, those lands belong to you.
Yeah.
Correct.
We can create a new area structure plan for it, if you prefer. Yeah, I'm not aware that there was one in place for it, so that's why, yeah. And if at the time that was privately owned and you purchased it, and that plan has not been repealed, then it's still in effect.
It wasn't, I don't believe it
Okay.
was an area structure.
Okay, I'm not aware of it. Yeah. If it was adopted, then the only way to get rid of it is either amend it or repeal it and then adopt it again. But if it was just a conceptual thing, then,
Yeah, it was, I think it was probably just conception.
okay.
So I guess to proceed from here, from what I see we should be doing is saying, yes, we need to come up with that, a draft of what that would look like, and then we can decide, once we get that draft, we can tweak it, and then we can move it into an area structure plan that gets approved, and then we can decide how to fund it, and where the utilities and how we would want to go, but at least come up with the plan at this point, because I think that's important.
Yes, and you are right, Mayor. So if you want to comment that process, generally speaking, we start with a conceptual design layout. Once we know what your themes are, in other words, we want residential, low density, or we want next density residential. So like you said, maybe 50% single family housing, 30% apartment, high density housing, a little bit of green space or whatever. So once we have a framework that you have in mind, we can create something. Then that will serve as basis for conversation. Once that is finalized, then we will build things, text and everything around it to make it an area structure plan.
And how long will that take?
I would say the initial conceptual design, that could take a couple, maybe 2 weeks. Now that we have an idea of we'll have to, of course, that will be just preliminary to serve as like basis for discussion. We'll have to, like I said, as we go further down the road, figure out servicing, you know, all of those other pieces, what will make sense. So revisions can occur here and there, but we'll, based on our understanding, come up with what makes sense to us best, and then from there we can make tweaks as we go along.
Okay, would
But
you-
like I said, it will be helpful to know what type of, you know, I know you've talked about residential, is it purely residential, and then just a mixture of the two, single and apartment style housing, or you want other land uses also.
I mean, that's a council decision, but, and maybe we can give you that just to say, you know, enough lots for 2 apartment blocks, the rest of the land into residential, and then whatever, you know, some land for green space within
Yeah,
that
okay.
area
Okay.
is what I would see. I don't have percentages in my
Yeah, for
mind,
sure.
and as a developer, you may have a better idea what it should be, but
Sure.
that's what I would see for that area.
Okay.
I don't, do you guys agree or disagree?
Agree?
Yeah, for the most part, agree, yeah. Again, we need a place where if anybody wants to build a new home, where do they go now?
Correct, yes.
And that's the idea, is to have some homes available, but also, like we were talking earlier, our biggest need is for rental. And we want to have spaces where if somebody's interested in building an apartment or some townhouses, that they could go and build those. That's
Yes.
what we need.
Yes, so my takeaway is that you want us to look at the lot availability study as one, so which is looking at entirety of all the different lands. Like I said earlier, create a map out of that, and then provide information about them. And then separate from that will be start working on an area structure plan for 5 and 11.
Yes.
So if you could just put that in writing, that kind of scope, and send it to me,
Okay.
or if you prefer us to direct you that way, you know, you've just described.
Yeah, I think I have an idea of what your direction is, yes.
I don't know, our council, are you interested in subdividing that, what he was calling lot 7, the trees, away from the rest of it at this point in time? I mean, we could, if it would fit in that new area structure plan, we could include that in there, but I don't think we need to redesign it or redesignate it at this point in time.
Okay.
I think we got enough other land that we don't have to worry about that. That's my take on it. Yeah. Councilor Yashishin?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really good start. I mean, we're being proactive in that, and I mean, if we're attracting the developers, we have it ready, right? We won't be scrambling or looking at something or, so, yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, and I think these 2 parcels are a lot of potential for that. So, yeah, it's good to see as we're going forward here.
Thank you. One other question. Did you want them combined as one?
5 and 11?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And maybe in some way that it could be phased in, because it. might
Yes,
not-
no, there is, like I said, I guess because of time, I don't want to get into all the nitty-gritties of the area structure plan, but one of the things you also have to address is what we call sequencing of development.
Yeah.
So phase, in terms of phase 1, which areas will be developed first, phase 2, phase 3, all of that have to be addressed, and I don't want to get into all the micro details of that, but yes, the basic elements are your infrastructure, the layout, what the uses will be, how you will fund them, and then what the sequencing of the development will be. So, like I said, where you will start and where you go to end.
Councilor Stenhouse?
So I just wanna be clear on this, are you gonna do a complete study of the town? Okay, so let's just say we can enforce our derelict bylaw, and these houses can be demolished and removed. So those are shovel-ready lots that can be built on. I'd like to see a total inventory of available lots in the town. You know what I mean? This would speed up the process if there's someone who owns a double lot that isn't doing anything with it, that maybe an apartment building or a duplex could go up on that, and it's already serviced.
Yes, that's a possibility. That will take some time because it's a comprehensive study that would need. It's doable, but it's going to take time. If we focus only on lands owned by the town, that would be a little bit more reduced in terms of the timeline, but both are doable. That is separate from the two specific laws that we are talking about, 5 and 11. So 5 and 11 will be part of that big study, but at the same time, I think council also wants to see an actual design for 5 and 11 because that's a bigger piece of land. The other ones will just be a showing this is available, that's available. If you want to buy and build, this is information you have. But this bigger chart, council is looking at potentially breaking them into several small ones
Right.
that people can buy and build. So there's a separate process for doing that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're clear on what we want, just to make sure, number one, and I made the motion here so I can really adjust it, but we would like to ask MMSA to come up with a design for blocks 5 and 11.
Okay.
And you had talked about having the plan for the vacant land, or what did you call the plan?
Lot availability study.
A what?
Lot
Lot
availability study.
availability study.
That's more comprehensive.
A little bit more comprehensive, sure. And so I guess those two things would be a great start for us in getting that going. Okay.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for me, please?
Well, one of the, don't leave. First, I'm going to amend my motion, we'll vote on that, and then we've got to talk about the R2 to R4 vacant land,
Okay,
that's the next
sure.
one. So
Okay, sure.
that's 8.2, but 8.1, the motion coming out 8.1 is that council directs administration, because that's the only one we can talk to work with MMSA to come up with a available lot,
A lot availability study.
lots
for the
availability
town.
study, and a
Area structure plan.
area structure plan for lots 5 and 11.
Correct.
Is that everybody clear?
Yeah.
Are you able to follow that, Sasha? Yeah, okay. All right, all in favor? It's carried. All right, moving on to 8.2. Can I get a motion? This is on page 92. Get a motion to start this.
The council approves changing 4 to 559th Street with a pipe grade from R2 to R4 within the land use bylaw 05/2015.
All right, so with that, I'll turn it back over to the minute.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of this, so.
Oh, okay. Well, you don't have to necessarily, we can turn it over. I know there's actually was an old study in there, and
Okay.
we'll turn it over, but are you able to stay for a few more minutes?
Yes,
Because
and
we
I
may have
briefly looked
questions
through
on
it.
that.
Yes, yeah, for
Oh,
sure. I
Okay.
briefly looked at it actually,
Sure.
whilst I was here, but for sure, yes.
Well, I was approached by,
Daryl.
Daryl, and, about a week ago. And, his expressing an interest for this land, and as he expressed, he's contemplating, a duplex or a fourplex, you know, the value of the land is 88,000, and that's what it's assessed at, but he wants to purchase it for 4,500, I believe. And he, you know, he seems sincere here to develop it within a reasonable amount of time. So this is why I put this in front of council. And I think he emailed council, maybe he did, I can't remember if he emailed council or not, as well as me, but, anyway, I thought, there would, and he had mentioned that he had talked to the previous CAO and didn't get anywhere, but we, had, you know, the mayor's expressed, the council has expressed an interest in developing land. So this was a vacant lot, and there were a couple of lots, and so I put it in front of council.
Am I allowed? Yeah, so,
Yeah.
my thoughts are that, one is that, could be corrected, my understanding is if council wants to sell land below market rate or below assessed rate, then, you can't just do it like a private transaction or sell it to one person, you have to do it publicly. And I think Mayor, confirmed that earlier, so it has to be an open process. And second, to ensure that the development follows through, that will have to be one of the conditions of sale. So a timeline for development and a timeline for applying for a development permit. So those would be at least two at a minimum requirements for that. So if council wants to sell it below market rate, like I said, it has to go through a public process, and then conditions of development have to include a timeline for development, and also a timeline to apply for a development permit first, and then to execute and complete, or even commence the development as well. Then it doesn't become an abandoned lot or somewhat here. To facilitate that, council can proceed to rezone the land from R2 to R4, and we can do that. And that will be an administration or town initiated amendment. So until you get to where you decide whether you want to sell it to this particular person or whoever. In other words, we don't have to wait to get there first to rezone. We can still preemptively go ahead and rezone it to facilitate that. So even if it doesn't end up going to this specific gentleman, then it's also brought to market, you know, for development as it were, by having it rezoned from R1 to R4, which gives people more options.
Right.
If you want to go into a higher density development. Yes.
Right, so, I mean, we want to develop, not necessarily sell it to him possibly, but have it available so that we can build an apartment or condo building on it, or.
Yes, yes. Because, like I said, if it's apartment, generally speaking, you don't need like a new structure plan because it's all one building with multiple units. If it's going to be several single lots, that's when the ASB comes in. But either of that will require rezone because the current zoning doesn't allow that.
But, aren't we taking a chance by rezoning it before? So it goes to a public auction. I buy it, but I want to put in a Jiffy Lube, a gas station, not a gas station, but a oil change. You know what I mean? If we rezone it before we sell it, aren't we chancing it?
Not necessarily, because in the land use bylaw, every district has what is allowed and what is not allowed. So R4 is still residential. It's just that it's more higher density. So R1 and R2 is just single family. You can't put apartment in R1 and R2. So if it's apartment that council is looking at seeing there, then R4 is the best district for that. Doesn't mean somebody can come in and do anything they want, because there are restrictions in the land use bylaw in terms of what you can do in R4. It's still not commercial. It's not going to change from residential to commercial. It's just that R4 means that you can put up higher density, which is apartments and those type of houses.
Yeah, yes, I understand that, but okay, so let's say I'm willing to pay 400,000 for that lot if you let me build my Jiffy Lube there.
No.
Do you know what I'm saying? That we may get a higher bid for what their purpose is, providing that you change your land use bylaw to.
Yes.
And I'm just using that as an example, a Jiffy Lube, it could be a parts store, something like that, you know what I mean?
Yes, yes, those scenarios do occur, but I don't see that as similar to this because if somebody comes and says, I want to do something that hasn't been contemplated
Right.
in the bylaw, of course, they need to have a bigger discussion with council. And council has to decide whether that's the path they want to go or not. Municipalities do that because sometimes they want to, or somebody has, come up with a very nice idea that, right, these days, there's competition amongst municipalities, everybody's trying to woo development. So sometimes you can make a drastic change to your bylaw, so long as you've done proper assessment to make sure that it's not going to create any negative impact that cannot be necessarily mitigated, then you have that option. Based on the discussions that we're having now, I don't foresee that happening because it's changing from one type of residential zoning to another type of residential zoning, all of which are limited only to residences. So it's not like we are changing from residential to industry or those type of things. Like, okay, now that's a bigger change than it's just one category of residential to another category.
Commenting a little bit,
off topic, and yeah, we can finalize this, but the other thing that we were going to be talking about is what incentives can we offer developers? And from your experience and what you've seen with the other communities that you deal with, would you recommend anything that works or that you see developers appreciate more than other things, like, a tax break for 2 years, or you put in the servicing, or get rid of the application fee, or what were developers really most interested in?
I would say it's a couple of things, but from my observation, one is the appeal of the community, and I think you've had an extensive conversation about that. Then the tax breaks also helps a lot. The biggest component of the development is infrastructure, and then interest on financing. So generally speaking, they have to make sure that it's viable, that they can recoup all the investments that they've made into that. Even though municipalities, try to, there are all these things that I have to say David has done great work in terms of what he has put together. Apart from infrastructure, it ultimately comes down to a tiny fraction of the cost of the development. So I'm not entirely sure how much of a difference those things make versus I have determined that there is a need here and I'm going to build, and the market is there. So in as much as I don't oppose anything, I also say that there's limit to what you can do as a municipality, and also if there is a reality of having to meet your obligations to your residents and all of that, then you need a tax base to, of course, it's a two-phase thing. You want to bring in and then expand your tax base and all of that. But once the market is there and they are able to resolve the puzzle of financing with whoever is going to fund them, I think for the municipalities, maybe a little bit of attraction here and there. All those things that we are doing, besides infrastructure, is a tiny fraction of the full cost of the development. Yeah, so yes, it helps if, especially, you can bring the service in to the lot. That makes a huge difference for them. But those tax breaks here and there, I'm not sure that they are the ultimate determinant factors. Versus if they are able to secure their financing, and then if there is service infrastructure that has to be brought in, if you are able to absorb part of it or spread it out so that they don't have to foot it upfront, then that's a bigger piece of the pie. But in your case, all of them, pretty much most of the lands are, there is servicing around them, so that's a huge plus, yeah.
Councillor Waco?
Daryl mentioned the soil
Oh,
samples that were taken out of there. I seem to remember in the before times that being done. We're not putting a condominium on here.
No.
It's a,
creek bed,
what's that?
that's a creek bed.
Yeah, so it's a swamp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had to, when the Children's Resource Council was there, we had to have pilings
Yeah,
go down like 15 feet.
yeah. And
It's not gonna be able to build.
yeah, so I mean, before we go changing these things, don't we have to know what it can support, right? I mean, this whole town is old lake bed when it comes right down to it, right? The Peavine Inn has a floating pad for their basement. I know when the hospital, when Tim Hortons was built, when they first drilled the first pilot holes, they're like, oh crap, and that's part of the reason why it took 10 years. And when they built the provincial building on the other side of the river, they had a mountain of gravel that sat there for a couple of years to compact that. Before we go changing these, thinking, we're gonna get a condo, we really need to know what the property can physically support. Because if he has to put in pilings that are 15, 20, 60 feet deep, well, that's gonna make any development untenable, is that the right word? Or not cost efficient.
but an R4 development would include condos, which, or I should say duplexes, which is what he was talking about, right?
And as an R1, so it's R2 right now.
R2 is,
R2 is strictly single dwelling?
Up to, yeah, predominantly, I think R1 is strictly single, R2 is, I think, that one plus maybe semi-detached, I'll confirm, yeah.
and R4, like I'm reading in here, would allow for, you know, a duplex or a dwelling unit, semi-detached, a townhouse, which I think would be all things that we
Yeah, those I'm not sure because based on how the land use bylaw is written now, R4 is mostly high density. So R1, R2 is single detached, those kind of things. So I'm not sure whether council wants to add those other types of low density housing in R4.
Can we find the study that he was referring or do our own? I don't know how much that is or how quick it is.
That's very expensive.
Is it?
They'd have to do test piles and soil samples, so they'd have to core it.
Yeah, and in
Oh,
some
okay, yeah,
places,
sorry.
you're gonna get straight sand. In other places, you're gonna get huge rocks. And one of the issues when the pilings in.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, my apology, correction. Yeah, so R4 actually, yeah, so we have apartment, condominium, duplex, semi-detached townhouse, seniors housing. Those are the type of residences allowed in R4, yes.
Do you know what's allowed in R2? Do you have, I don't have a bylaw right
Yeah, there used to be copies here for.
Yeah, there used to be. Okay, well, is it on the map that says what it would accommodate?
No, it will be the, I believe there was a physical copy of the land use bylaw.
It might be on our map, you know, that what it allow, if it's designated as an R2, will it say what it's allowed?
I don't have that now.
Oh,
Think Teresa, you have that now?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, it doesn't say, it
I'll
just says.
go
our-
onto your, if you give me a minute, I'll go
Okay.
to your website.
So while he's doing that, just going, and, I mean, if we can convert this to make it easier for what he or others, like, there was another developer that was interested in that same chunk of land, so I definitely, and yes, the town may have not followed the right process when it sold the land over here.
I think that was a completely different set of circumstances.
Yeah, I think, you know, as Commandy was saying, if we're trying to sell our land, we should be putting it out to tender to say, anybody interested, then we can't say, you know, it was just one or another person. Open it up to, and say, bid on this, and here's the conditions that we would ask for, and, make sure that they're reasonable, but I also think as we go into 8.4, those incentives that we want to give developers, we'd say those are gonna be available too, right, to make it a little more attractive.
And I think part of the reason why the lot over here sold for so cheap was there's issues there.
Yeah.
Like the assessed value of that property was, well, it wasn't $88,000.
But I think the key point is it wasn't advertised and
Yeah,
sold that.
that's the point behind it.
Well,
It was a private sale.
It was not.
Well, no.
I thought that Daryl said that he offered more than they sold it for.
Mhm.
So
Well, I
that's an
mean, you
issue.
see, that's what, and that's an issue, and I do have a problem with that, but it was broken down for us at the time, and I didn't know that Daryl had offered anything on that particular lot, but it was broken down and it followed the rules.
Yeah.
And it was within the scope of what the CAO could do.
And was acceptable at the time.
Yes.
But I just believe that we should be putting it out for, you know, a bid. You bid and get it. And this, again, this is my personal belief. I don't really care how much we get for it, right? Like you're saying that, oh, I want to get some more money for the land. I'm more interested in getting the type of housing that we need in our community than I am about making an extra $30,000 off the land. We're gonna make that off the taxes in time. Right now, we're getting nothing. We've got a shortage of houses. I'd rather see that started and developed and collect our money over time. That's my viewpoint.
Yeah, I'm
And
good
we
with
can
that
talk
too.
about that.
And Daryl has proven that he'll build stuff. He really has
Absolutely.
built most of downtown, right? Like rebuilt it, so.
He does. Oh, he's got an answer, I can tell.
Yes, yes. Actually, there are some similarities between the two. So R2 now has single detached dwelling, that's the permitted use. The other ones are discretionary, which is that it's at the totally up to the town to say yes or no.
That's
So that-
R3?
No, R2.
No, R2.
Oh,
Okay.
And the discretionary ones are duplex, semi-detached, and apartment. The other ones are garden suite, garage suite, which is secondary suite in addition to,
You
so
don't have to change things.
I think the difference is that in R4, apartment, duplex, and all of these things are permitted uses. So once you meet everything, you are obliged to get a permit. In R2, it's totally up to the town to determine whether or not these other developments are feasible there. So that's the difference. So in R2, single detached housing is permitted. All those other uses that I talked about is discretionary. So council hasn't determined that they want to let those things happen there necessarily. It's like on a case by case basis, they'll make that determination. But in R4, they've pre-decided that these places are appropriate for higher density housing. So apartment, townhouse, duplex, those are permitted in R4, but they are not permitted in R2. They are only discretionary.
Okay,
So
and
that's
in
the-
R4, is it discretionary to put in a single family home?
No,
No, so
It's
if
not.
it's R4, you cannot put
Yeah.
in a single family.
correct. As I said, that's for higher density housing.
Yeah, it might be just as well to leave it. If the other ones are discretionary and if we put conditions on it, that would work, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I heard him say duplex and fourplex. I think that based on the way the land use bylaw is, fourplex will fall under apartment because it's 3 or more. So it can only go up to.
I don't think he was interested in a fourplex, so it was duplex.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe 2 duplexes.
Yeah, yeah.
Or maybe, he said maybe a duplex and maybe a single family.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
I
Those
think
things
we're
will
further
still be.
ahead, just leave it.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you. I think we could leave it and it would still allow for fourplex, 2 duplexes or a single family home.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So can I, are we good to, do you want me to withdraw my motion?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how we started the conversation. Well, even before we vote on it, I'm gonna suggest that Clemente can get on the road unless somebody has another question for him. No. Really appreciate you
Yes.
coming down and sharing this information, and we look forward to your area structure plan and a lot, I keep forgetting the name of it, it doesn't stick.
Lots of availability.
A lot of availability, thank you.
Thank you very much. I also appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for all the
No
information.
problem. Thank you. Bye, Sasha.
Do you want to say?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, so we're working on we had a motion that we approve changing those lots from R2 to R4. But after having more discussion and learning more, we're talking about just leaving them.
Yeah.
Excuse me, yeah. Thanks, Committee. No problem. Safe travels.
Just receiving for information.
Yeah, we received for information only. Yeah, okay.
No, aren't we gonna do something with that lot though?
Well, we're receiving, I think this is
Yes.
where I'm going. See what you guys think is, we're dealing with changing it from R4 to R2, and we're gonna say, no, we're not dealing with that. However, we still need to do with what we want to do with that lot, and that would be a separate motion.
Yeah.
In here. That's what I'm thinking,
Yeah,
we make it
yeah,
separate. So we'll start with yours, yeah.
So I move to withdraw that, my motion.
And do you want to just receive for information only?
Yeah, and receive for information.
Well,
Or do we want to? No, we want to
Well, we'll
make-
make two.
why don't you,
Yeah.
We'll make 2
We'll
motions.
make 2 motions.
but before, can I?
Okay, yeah.
Can I, in your motion, can you say somehow, as it refers to our land use bylaw R2, because when you read the background information here, at the top paragraph, it says, the property is listed as an R2 low-density residential public service type property, zoned or permitted use of a single-attached dwelling unit. So if you, in your motion, you say if we follow our land use bylaw zoning of R2? Do you know what I'm saying? So that will include everything that he read? It could be single detached.
It's already in R2. So that land already has all of those
Okay,
issues.
okay.
Yeah. Any other questions on this motion?
So what did I miss in the discussion? So why are we changing it to an R4? Or
Or not.
yeah,
We're not.
The rationale is, oops,
There's about
There's too much.
the rationale is that, under an R2,
Right.
you can have a duplex, you can have a fourplex, or it would be classified as an apartment, and you can also have, semi-detached units. So all of the things that we would like to see in there are there, yeah.
Okay.
Um, So we don't really need to change it. Those would be discretionary items. It's like an R2 is scheduled for single-family homes, but under discretionary, you could put those other units in. And that's really what we're looking for. So we don't really need to change it, and under discretionary or a land use person can just say, yeah, it would be acceptable.
Well, it's gotta come to the municipal planning commission, right? Have you seen? We still do that? They haven't met in like a year and a half.
No, they don't have to go there because it's a discretionary use, so we go to.
Administrative, to the council.
Yeah, well, no, to our development officer can make that call.
Okay.
Yeah. And he usually refers it to MMSA to get their opinion on, should this be allowed.
I think we just got it.
Yeah. All right, anything else?
I'm just voting.
You're voting, okay, all in favor? All right, that passes now. Do we want to make one more?
Until all this land stuff right now.
Yeah, let's make a motion on this one for this, I'll make the motion that the council directs administration to, advertise and, what's the word, auction? That's not the word, but we, yeah, put the 48, 25, 59th Street, for sale by auction. Does that,
No, not
No.
auction.
well, okay, what else do you word that word auction? You bid on it. You put in a bid, much like, huh?
By submitting a bid, a tender.
Okay, well, that's sort of a sealed auction, right? Whoever's the highest bidder gets it. It's like, that's what I was, whatever we would call that, where they can put in a bid for that land.
Do we wanna make a
Why
minimum?
don't you say public bid?
For public bids, sure. But we would have to have some conditions on it.
Public,
Yes.
Okay, for public bids. Yeah, we'll put it up for public bid.
Do we want to put a reserve bid on that?
No, well, this is my opinion, so my opinion is no. We would put conditions that they must have something on there within a certain time frame. So they can't buy it and sit on it, and they can't buy it and flip it. So we would want those conditions, right? If they haven't built on it, within a certain time frame, then the town can buy it back for the same price that they purchased it.
Yeah,
That's
first right,
correct.
first right of refusal.
Yes, yeah.
And for the same amount.
And
Absolutely.
for the same amount.
Because if you read the documents, we actually paid over 53,000 for that lot.
Yeah, but again, I'm just, and we may wanna put a reserve on it, but I'm more interested in getting something built on it than I am getting, if we got 49,000, and it's less, I wouldn't worry. If we got, you put in an offer of 5,000, I would be happy with just getting it going. truly, that's my perspective, but I also understand that maybe we don't wanna do it, I'm just giving you my opinion on it. Maybe we want to make sure we get, I mean, market value for it is probably 88,000. Maybe, I don't know, that's what it's assessed.
No, it was assessed, the assessment in 2019 was 96,000, but the report says it was, has a value of 101.
Yeah, that's very old evaluation, or valuation, so that's 6 years old.
The assessment I got from Green was the
88.
Here's an example of not putting a reserve bid on your properties is the subdivision behind E.W. Pratt, when Bronx used to be there, sat empty for a long time. And then whoever owned it put it up for bid, and the auction company convinced them, well, you don't need reserve bids, people will pay for this. And some of those lots went for $2,000 or $3,000, which, you know, the person who owned it kind of lost their shirt a little bit. But now there's, what, 10 homes in there, nice ones, that are generating tax revenue now. Now, we would initially quite probably take a loss of what the town paid for it. However, we get nothing from taxes right now for it. You put a couple of decent places on there, and now we're generating tax revenue. Very quickly, when you go from making nothing to making something, you very quickly make up any losses that you had incurred in the initial selling of it. So yeah, I mean, reserve $5,000 as a reserve bid.
Well, 10% of what we purchased. Right, so 59,000, so 5,900 or 6,000.
Yeah, and there's rules around selling stuff for less than assessed value.
Yeah.
So I'm sure David will find all that and do it all right.
But those rules apply more around selling properties that was a tax sale, like that we took in by taxes. I think we could sell some of our land for $0 if we wanted to sell it. I mean, there's communities I know that sell it for $1, they'll sell their town lots for $1.
But there's all sorts of conditions on it.
Yeah, well, that's what we need conditions.
Yeah, there'll be
on.
conditions, yeah.
Councillor Martins?
Thank you. So I really appreciate the perspective, you know, good thoughts. If we're doing something that's a larger incentive, like $1 lots, I think that we can have those discussions as we are in open session. When we're talking about specific land plots and we're throwing in pricing, I think we're almost, it's the same reason I asked us not to publish what our budget is for things. I feel like we're changing ourselves. Now someone knows and we're willing to take not 49,000. I'm not suggesting that we put a reserve bid on it. I'm just saying we should openly talk about, you know, for example, what the former Mr. Daryl Suchuk offered. I don't think those are numbers we should throw out publicly. I don't mind having them in a closed session, but when we talk about what we could take, especially because we're putting this out in public bid, this is just my thought. I don't think we should throw out numbers. Now, if we're having a $1 incentive, yeah, that's public, but when we talk numbers or budgets that we set for something, we're almost giving our hand away, and I don't think we should have that. That's why land discussions can be had in camera. That's just my opinion.
No, that's a good point. I mean, we're not, on a bid like this, it could be looked at, yeah. So maybe we can finish that if we get into our closed session with timelines that we're getting.
We still have to talk about what's his name.
Oh, we've got lots of agenda yet to get through. So how do you guys want to go? Like I started the motion with, we dispose of it by auction. How do we finish this off?
Or we say public bid.
or
Say
public
motion.
bid, public bid.
Is that the motion?
But with the conditions of, we have conditions that would be, it has to be developed on by, what, 2 or 3 years? 3 years?
Can we not say development has to start, not that it's done?
Yeah.
It has to start within a year.
Then all they have to do is put a foundation in the unit.
Yeah.
So
What
it
what
has
do you
to
consider
start and
start?
be completed.
Well, that's what I'm saying, has to be completed by a certain time, because if you, I mean, depending on who it is, they might have to come up with plans, and I'm saying 2 or maybe even 3. I mean, that's still reasonable time to get money together and crews together, and, you know, that kind of thing. 2 or 3 years, I'm thinking, that it has to be built. I don't know, what do the rest of you think?
I think we need to see what the MGA says. I think we need to do our background information before we make those decisions tonight.
Yeah, and we can maybe see, do a little bit of research on what conditions we should have.
Yes.
So maybe I'll revamp my motion to say have, administration look into what conditions we should put on the land, before we put it out for public bid.
And to come back with information, how we go about through the MGA, if we're, the whole process on doing this.
And ensure that we're not breaking MGA rules by this process. Boy, it's,
Yeah, this is all tax arrears stuff, I think, fine.
all right, all in favor? It's carried. How's everybody doing? Do we want 5? Are you good to keep going?
Five.
Okay, I've seen that. We'll take a quick break, because we've got lots to get through.
We won't make it.